The Importance of Fun by Grayson Gears. It was another day, and she was tired. She couldn't let it show, of course. Her loyal subjects would never see her tired. She was the pillar that held up not only their nation, but the world itself. She was the sun, bringing warmth and happiness to every pony. She should be the epitome of energy and power. Her body, however, disagreed. There was far more moving to there was far more to moving the sun than just a glowing light and a wave of her horn. It did take some effort. Then, at the end of the day, she would have to do the same with the moon, and no matter what, the moon was always harder. Raising the moon never seemed to agree with her. There were some nights where she couldn't help but find herself wishing. No, she knew where that train of thought would lead her, and she was in no mood for it. The fact was that being depressed just got depressing after a while. It was a vicious cycle that she was tired of following. Shaking her head and trying to clear her fatigue away, she walked away from her throne and went into the hallway.
Excuse me, Golden Scroll?
She greeted the brightly yellow pony standing outside.
Oh, what do you need, Princess?
Her steward replied, quickly pulling out a piece of parchment with her magic.
Is there anything scheduled for me to do today?
She asked, slightly hoping for something to distract her thoughts.
Hmm. It would appear not. It, it would not appear so, Princess. There are a few things coming up, most importantly, a meeting with an envoy from the Griffin Kingdom in the next few days. But until then, nothing.
Golden Scroll pursed her lips as she browsed the list.
Is there something you would like to schedule? No, thank you.
She nodded her head towards the steward.
In fact, why don't you take the rest of the day off? There's no sense in you working if I'm not.
A smile immediately appeared on Golden Scroll's face.
Well, thank you, Princess. I hope you enjoy your day.
It looked like the Golden Scroll was tempted to hug her, but she caught herself and simply bowed. Standing back up, Golden Scroll gave her a quick wave before happily trotting outside. While she was pleased to make some pony happy, this still left her tired, with nothing to distract her. She was tempted to retire to her bedchambers for what she felt was a well-deserved nap. But then an idea popped into her head. It had been some time since she had checked on her student, Twilight Sparkle. She had made sure to get reports from her teachers, of course. They had been nothing but impressive. Twilight seemed to absorb every possible scrap of information given to her, and she was able to perform any spell taught to her almost immediately. Still, it was always important to witness these sort of things firsthand, so she headed towards the one place she knew she could find Twilight: the library. She was proven right, even before she walked through the library doors, by a voice that echoed through the air.
Okay, Spike. Now, can you find me a copy of Magic Through the Ages?
Twilight's voice was unmistakable. Sure thing, Twilight. Just 1 second. Spike's voice quickly accepted. The dragon had grown faster than she had expected. He was already running around on 2 legs and cheerfully conversing with any pony that would listen to him. Gingerly, she opened the doors to the library and peered inside. Her student was surrounded by a massive stack of books, each novel so precariously perched it was a wonder that they hadn't toppled over on top of Twilight. Twilight didn't even notice her predicament, absolutely focused on the pages in front of her as a pen, held by her magic aura, viciously scribbled onto the scroll.
Good morning, Twilight.
She greeted, but the purple unicorn failed to notice her, so intent on her studies.
Twilight.
A little louder this time.
Hmm?
Twilight turned slightly towards the nose, one of her legs unconsciously brushing against the stack of books. The stack immediately toppled over, crashing into the stack next to it, which continued in a domino effect until the floor was covered with scattered books.
Ah! Oh no! How did this.
Twilight's eyes caught sight of her.
Princess? Oh no, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was just trying to study and I needed more books and there's no need to worry, my student.
She consoled.
This is easily fixed. Though perhaps now you'll know to be a little more aware of your surroundings.
She waved her horn, the books stacking themselves back up into much smaller, sturdier piles around her student. Walking past the piles, She paused to examine a few of the book's titles.
Star Swirl's Applied Magical Theories, Understanding the Basics of Spells, the 10-day formula to a longer horn.
She looked back at Twilight.
Exactly what are you studying? Well, we were assigned a paper on the development of magic over the ages, and I wanted to make sure I had every bit of information possible.
Twilight gestured towards a small pile of scrolls next to her. They couldn't be less than 10, and they were all covered with writing.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that most papers needed to only be 3 scrolls long.
She mused, cocking an eyebrow.
Oh, you're not wrong, Princess. But there's so much to this history that I couldn't stop at just 3 scrolls. I wanted to get all my facts straight.
Twilight answered triumphantly, a determined smile on her face.
And how long exactly have you spent on this speech?
She asked, though she had a feeling she knew the answer.
Not that long really, just an hour or two.
Twilight replied, her eyes shifting nervously. Here's that book you wanted, Twilight, Spike interrupted, charging towards them with a large book held over his head. Seeing her, he stopped, his eyes growing wide in surprise. Princess? Good morning!
And it's good to see you too, Spike. Perhaps you can answer my question. Exactly how long has Twilight been working on this paper?
Spike smiled, obviously eager to please her. No problem. She started exactly last afternoon, and she went way late into the night. Then she made me promise to wake her up as early as possible today. I got her up even before the sun rose. She frowned a little at the answer as Spike failed to stifle a large yawn. Looking closer at her student, she was able to see the slight bags under her eyes. Twilight was tired, like her.
Twilight, there's no need to spend so much time on an assignment like this. It's only 1 paper, and I'm sure your teachers would rather read through 3 scrolls rather than 20.
She reasoned.
But I can't just do the minimum for this work.
Twilight argued, surprising her.
I have to do great. No, better than great. I need to make you proud. I'm your student after all.
I need to do great. No, better than great. A dark blue alicorn with a flowing mane argued with her. She had discovered her poring over an ancient text late into the night, almost falling asleep on top of the pages. I am your sister, after all. I want to make you proud. She paused. The vision of the past burned into her mind. This wasn't the same. This couldn't be the same. Life would never be so cruel as to force something like that on her again. Then had that pride turned into jealousy, gnawing forever at her sister's car, tearing her apart until Luna could look at her and only see hatred, lost in her darkness. That couldn't happen again. She wouldn't allow it.
Are you okay, Princess?
Twilight asked, hesitantly. She realized she'd been staring down at Twilight for nearly a minute.
Oh, yes. Well, that's not what is important here. What's important is that there's something else you can do for me.
She replied, putting a smile back on her face.
Really? What is it?
Twilight was so eager, so ready to do whatever she wished.
You can stop focusing on so much on your work. You can try to focus more on having some fun.
She revealed with a grin.
What?
Twilight and Spike looked so confused that she couldn't help but chuckle softly.
Get out of the library for once. Try to take a break. Focus on making yourself happy rather than pleasing me. And maybe let your assistant Spike get some sleep every now and then.
Spike nodded eagerly to that, yawning again.
But,
Twilight shifted nervously.
How do you think I should do that, Princess? Oh dear.
She muttered to herself.
Well, come along, Twilight. It looks like it's lesson time. As for you, Spike, you should probably take a nap. Though I do seem to remember our chef talking about a large order of gems arriving last night. I bet he could be persuaded to part with a few.
Spike's eyes lit up at the prospect of gems. Really? Thanks, Princess! He rushed out of the room, a purple and green blur. She smiled as he fled by her, then she turned back to Twilight.
Now, let's go, Twilight. I don't want to see you taking any notes.
She pulled a pen and scroll away from Twilight's magical grasp, who could only grin sheepishly in response.
Step 1. The one thing I've always found that gets my mind off of work or other pursuits is sweets.
She explained, stepping through a par of double glass doors.
Especially those from the #1 donut shop in Canterlot. Ah, you're too kind, Princess Celestia.
The tan-colored unicorn greeted from behind the counter.
Mm. Joe, I've been coming here ever since you opened up your store. Do you think you could just call me Celestia? Alright. Tell you what, Princess. You ever take a break from raising the sun and moon over Equestria, and I'll call you whatever you want.
He answered with a chuckle. This was a conversation they'd had so many times before. She thought she'd always wished for a different response.
And who's this with you?
He finally noticed Twilight.
Just my student. I'm trying to show her some of the finer points of enjoying yourself.
She explained.
I think she'd enjoy one of your specials, and I'll take one as, well, coming right up, Princess.
Joe accepted with a smile, his horn glowing as he prepared a tray of donuts. Luckily, it was still relatively early in the morning, so the shop was empty. Though, she always did enjoy the expressions on the faces of a few ponies who'd managed to catch her enjoying a plate of sweets. She took Twilight over to an empty table, though her student only looked confused.
This isn't some kind of test, is it? Where if I don't have fun, I'll fail?
She couldn't believe how worried Twilight was, how nervous she was about disappointing her.
This is a happy outing, Twilight, where hopefully I can show you that school isn't everything.
She tried to console.
Now, try some of the donuts and hot chocolate.
She finished as Joe brought in their order. It was a 2 large cups of steaming hot cocoa with 3 donuts, each covered in a bright pink frosting and evenly covered with a healthy layer of chocolate sprinkles.
Oh, wow!
Twilight exclaimed. The meal almost seemed to exude a sugary radiance.
There's no need to hold back on my account. Feel free to help yourself.
Twilight immediately dug in with gusto. She felt tempted to join with the same enthusiasm, but such actions were not allowed in her position. She had to satisfy herself with a small bite from each donut, daintily dipping into the hot chocolate before being placed in her mouth. Just another thing that made her tired.
So, what do you think, Twilight?
She asked, more to distract her one thought than anything else.
It's perfect. Just like when Mom and Dad would take me and Shining Armor out together.
She paused, a donut halfway through her mouth.
I wish I could see him. You do know how he's doing in the Royal Guard. I'm afraid not, Twilight.
She admitted. She had known her brother had joined the guard, but she could keep tabs on everything.
Have you tried sending him any letters? A few times, but the mailman said he wouldn't be allowed to answer then. At least not until his training's over.
A gloomy look covered Twilight's face, and that just wasn't allowed. Not on this outing.
Well, how about this? I could personally check with the captain on how he's doing. I bet he misses you. You are his favorite little sister, after all,
she said. That managed to bring a small grin back to her student's face.
Yeah, he is the best brother I could ever hope for.
Twilight swallowed the last bit of her meal.
So now what?
Her own meal nearly finished, so she quickly drained the last of her cocoa.
Exactly how much of Canterlot have you seen, Twilight? Outside of your classrooms in the library, that is.
She asked in return.
Well, does outside of the castle count?
She replied meekly.
Not quite. How about a walk then?
he offered.
Sure, where to?
A tone of excitement crept into Twilight's voice.
You'll see.
She replied, intentionally vague. The two stood outside of a canterlot now, before a beautiful pond created by a powerful waterfall. Twilight took in the amazing view, and then narrowed her eyes in a bit of puzzlement.
This place is amazing, Princess. Why are we the only ponies here? You'd expect every pony to be here to enjoy this.
She pondered out loud.
Because those ponies are too caught up in their work to try and enjoy the world around them.
She chided. A small smile grew on Twilight's face as she understood the comparison.
Still, this is just so amazing, Princess Celestia. I get to walk around Canterlot with you, the princess.
Twilight paused.
But it is a little strange. I keep expecting an order or something.
She understood that feeling from her subject very well. While it was useful when it came to diplomatic negotiations, it was very difficult for her to make any connections with any normal ponies.
There's no need to think that, Twilight. But I think I know a way to make things a bit easier.
She nestled down into the grass to relax.
Let's pretend I'm not the princess, and that you're not my student. Ask me any question you can think of. Anything you'd be worried to ask me otherwise, and I'll answer it.
She told her, hoping this would elevate some of the tension between them.
Any question at all?
She nodded towards her student.
Well, how did you become the princess? I mean, I know that you have to be the daughter of a king and a queen, but where are they?
Twilight trailed off into silence. Now that was a tough question. Not because the answer would be painful or difficult to explain, but because it would be boring. In the end, it would just be a long discussion on politics and on why the title of princess was just the right level of power. Queen was too intimidating and made diplomatic negotiations more difficult, but just ruler was too vague and made it sound like she had less power than she truly did. Princess managed to reach the real balance, but saying that would just be so dull. However, just because she had promised to answer any question didn't mean that she had to answer it truthfully.
Actually, it's all in the crown.
She gestured with a hoof to the golden headpiece resting on the top of her mane.
Any pony that wears this is automatically declared the ruling princess.
Twilight could only stare, unconvinced, in response.
That's a joke, right? Oh no, haven't you ever wondered why I never take it off? I have to be constantly on the watch, for if anyone were to take it, they'd be the new ruler. They could be... Oh no.
She yelled in mock horror as she levitated the crown of her mane. It floated swiftly through the air until it hovered over Twilight's head.
Twilight, you traitor.
She released the spell and the crown settled neatly on her student's head.
Alas, I have been dethroned.
She bemoaned, throwing her head to the ground in a terribly overdramatic fashion.
All hail the new Princess Twilight.
Her powerful announcement echoed across the water. Twilight's head sunk slightly in embarrassment.
Princess, you don't need...
She started to complain.
But you're princess now, Twilight.
She interrupted.
But that means you've inherited all my duties. You're the one who has to constantly be on guard now, always on the watch, prepared for any challenge.
With each word, she slid a little closer towards Twilight. Her student finally managed to giggle and began to play along.
Okay, Celestia. As your new princess, I ask you, what challenges do I need to prepare for?
Twilight asked.
Usurpers.
She replied, completely serious.
They can appear at any moment, ready to use any underhanded tactics to try and take power away from you. In fact, I think I see some of them now.
She pointed one of her hooves towards the horizon, and Twilight immediately followed with her eyes. And that's what exactly she'd been hoping for. With Twilight distracted, she focused her power towards one simple spell, and with a wave of her head, telekinetically shoved Twilight into the water. With a startled gasp, the purple unicorn vanished into the water. She quickly walked over to the pond's edge, a soft laughter escaping from her lips. She expected her student to burst out of the water at any moment. Any moment now. Just a few more seconds. Nothing happened. And then she started to worry. Had she used too much power in the spell? Had she just hurt Twilight badly enough that she couldn't swim? She had to go in after her. She needed to pull her out and apologize immediately. It was only meant to be a silly prank. Oh, how could she have been so foolish? She took a step closer into the water and immediately felt a grip of telekinesis spell around her head. She could have easily resisted the spell. Such an action would have been trivial for her. But where was the fun in that? She smiled and let herself be yanked into the water to join her student. Sputtering, both of them rose out of the water. Silly grins plastered on their faces.
Well done, Princess Twilight.
She congratulated. Twilight had somehow kept the crown situated on her head throughout the encounter.
How did you manage to stay underwater for so long? It was a new spell I had just finished researching. I used telekinesis to gather the air bubbles underwater so I could breathe. I just needed to wait for you to step into the water.
Her student explained proudly.
But I think I've had enough ruling over Equestria. I don't think I'll be able to handle all the plots against me. I humbly return your title back to you, Princess Celestia.
Twilight took the crown from her head and settled it back on Celestia's mane.
And I humbly accept it. Of course you do realize I have to get you back for that prank, right?
She swiftly raised a wave of water and sent it crashing into her student's surprised face.
Two can play at that game, Princess.
Twilight raised her own, slightly less impressive wave and sent it towards her teacher with as much gusto as she could. Soon, she guessed their cries of mirth would be heard all the way into the city. Time seemed to pass so quickly for the two of them, and before she knew it, it was time for her to begin lowering the sun.
I'm sorry, Twilight, but it looks like that's all the fun we can have today.
She apologized.
Oh, that's all right, Princess.
Twilight replied, lying down into the grass next to her. She was clearly exhausted. Well, both of them were. Slowly, they stood up, stretching their legs, and made their way back into Canterlot. And what a sight they were! The princess and her student walking through the streets, completely soaking wet. A few gawking stares from other ponies followed them, but she didn't care. There was nothing for her to be ashamed of, and she had spent the day making sure her student had fun. And it couldn't have gone any better. Soon, they had come back to the library.
Now, I believe that you have a paper to finish, my student.
She reminded.
And I do hope you've learned something today. Of course, Princess. I can't always be focused on work. I need to take a break every now and have some fun.
Twilight replied proudly.
Very good. But I have one more thing to tell you, Twilight.
She lowered her head down and affectionately nuzzled Twilight's cheek.
I will always be proud of you, no matter what.
Twilight simply smiled, and that was enough. She smiled back and walked away, leaving her student to her work. She returned to the castle, walking out to a lonely balcony that overlooked Ponyville. Focusing all of her magic, the sun slowly sank below the horizon, covering the land in darkness. With that done, she focused again, bringing the moon up into the sky behind her, and with it, the ever-dark presence of the monster that resided in that celestial prison. Her sister. No, not her sister. She could never allow to think that. It was Nightmare Moon. She stared up at the moon, its weak radiance bringing some light back to the land, and felt so tired. She knew that today did not make up for all the mistakes she had made with her sister, of all the transgressions, but part of her hoped that it had helped, at least a little.
I miss you, Luna.
She whispered into the night air, so cold now. Then, far up into the sky, behind the blackness, the anger, the pain, a weak voice whispered back, I miss you so much, big sister. The end.